Another section is devoted to the mentally ill and asocial. A grisly vision is conjured up of idiots and retards gradually outnumbering normal people. Still other sections deal with race, preservation, and refinement. Our first principle of beauty is health, Hitler declares. The methods of medical science will ensure that end. With the physician as esthetician, aesthetic problems became medical ones. This exhibition already defines the presumptions underlying mass murder. No longer does the physician minister to the individual. Now he is the healer of the corpus of the race, a biological warrior, fighting diseased and inferior elements that threaten the body of the German folk. Now the physician in uniform comes to the fore of society. The Nazification of physicians began in the first months of Nazi rule, as Jewish doctors were stripped of their positions. This mass expulsion created undreamt of career possibilities. Physicians with the right ideology quickly soared to the top. Special schools offered courses in Nazi medicine. No other profession could boast so many party members. 45% of German physicians belonged to the party. Mein Kampf clearly states the goal of Nazism's biomedical pioneers. A state which preserves in a time of pollution its finest racial elements must one day be Lord of the earth. Our followers must never forget this when they compare the sacrifices to the envisioned results. Gerhard Wagner, the Third Reich's chief doctor, promises that in the future, too, we shall fulfill our mission according to the Führer's will, to create the new German man. At the National Party rally in 1935, Hitler tells Wagner his intention: to have the incurably ill liquidated.
Was wir uns unter der deutschen Jugend der Zukunft wünschen, ist etwas anderes, als was die Vergangenheit sich gewünscht hat. Wir müssen einen neuen Menschen lernen, auf dass unser Volk nicht an den typischen Degenerationserscheinungen dieser neuen Zeit zugrunde geht.
During this rally, new laws are made public, which Gerhard Wagner lauds in his speech as the law that will protect German blood, the Nuremberg Laws. Marriage between Germans and Jews is outlawed. In 1936, Wagner discusses with other high-ranking party men and doctors the possibility of making a film. At the film's premiere in Berlin, 1937, Dr. Wagner gives the welcoming speech. The film will be shown in every cinema in Germany.
Alles Lebensschwache geht in der Natur unfehlbar zugrunde. Wir Menschen haben gegen dieses Gesetz der natürlichen Auslese in den letzten Jahrzehnten furchtbar gesündigt. Wir haben unwertes Leben nicht nur erhalten, wir haben ihm auch Vermehrung gewährt. Die Nachkommen dieser Kranken sahen so aus. Erbgesunde Menschen wohnten in engen, lichtlosen Gassen und halb verfallenen Lauben. Idioten und Schwachsinnigen baute man aber Paläste, und diese kranken Menschen waren gar nicht empfänglich für die Schönheit, mit der man sie umgab. Das deutsche Volk kennt das ganze Ausmaß dieses Elends wohl kaum. Es kennt nicht den drückenden Geist jener Häuser, in denen Tausende lallende Schwachsinnige künstlich ernährt und gepflegt werden müssen, die tiefer stehen als jedes Tier. In den letzten 70 Jahren hat sich unser Volk um 50% vermehrt, während die Zahl der Erbkranken im gleichen Zeitraum um 450% gestiegen ist. Wenn diese Entwicklung so weiterliefe, würde schon in 50 Jahren auf 4 gesunde Menschen ein Erbkranker kommen. Ein endloser Zug des Grauens würde in die Nation hineinmarschieren, maßloses Elend über ein wertvolles Volk kommen, das dann mit Riesenschritten seinem Ende entgegenginge. Das Gesetz zur Verhütung
Sculptors like Arno Breker and Joseph Thorak were not only artists, they were creators of a new type of man. It was their task to convey an image of the goal envisioned. To attain it, the Nazis would soon resort to more concrete measures. And it is Hitler himself who sets the process in motion. In 1938, he becomes active in a case that attracts his attention. The case of a child born blind who lacks one leg and part of an arm. Hitler orders his personal physician, Karl Brandt, to intervene. The child, whose name is Knauer, is said to be an idiot. Brandt, in Hitler's name, will tell the child's doctor to perform euthanasia, that is, to kill the child. Brandt was also to inform them that any judicial measures taken against them would be, through Hitler's fiat, null and void. Later, Brandt was told to implement euthanasia in all similar cases. Euthanasia means helping someone who is suffering to die. In the context of Nazi racial policy, the term would find a new meaning. On September 1st, 1939, Germany attacks Poland. The Second World War has begun. 9 days before, Germany signed a non-aggression pact with the USSR. 2 weeks after war's outbreak, Hitler inspects a virtually vanquished Poland. A few weeks later, Hitler orders the start of the euthanasia program. Germany is to be cleansed of its failed human specimens. Hitler's friend and personal physician, Karl Brandt, and his chief of staff, Philipp Bühler, are empowered to choose physicians for the program. The order is written out on Hitler's personal stationery and backdated to the day when war broke out. The tactic indicates doubts on Hitler's part. Even in the Knauer case, he had ordered that his role be kept secret. Now he hoped that the program would be more acceptable, if it could be linked with the war's outbreak. Murder of the inferiors would thus appear to be a mobilization measure. In Germany, psychiatry's ambition to preserve the body of the folk. Murder would soon be the most important form of therapy. The future laboratory for this form of therapy, the test field for extermination, was already in German hands. Poland, which had been crushed in less than a month. After extensive tests at Brandenburg prison, Hitler, on the advice of SS doctor Werner Heyde, recommends the lethal use of carbon monoxide. An office is opened in Berlin for the program. Its address, Tiergartenstrasse 4, provides the organization's code name, T4. A system using questionnaires and doctors' reports takes form. The forms are distributed to hospitals and asylums. For each patient, details regarding pathology, work capacity, race, religion, and criminal record must be filled in. A space is reserved for the physician's decision. A blue minus sign means life. A red plus sign, death. From the beginning, Jews have a special status. For them, the diagnosis that they are Jews is enough. Later, the screened-out patients are fetched. SS personnel in white coats attend to their transport. The bus windows are painted over to prevent people from seeing in. After a temporary layover, the patients are transported to the death facility. During this time, their families receive 3 letters. The first one states that the patient has been moved on account of the war. Then a second letter confirms that the patient has arrived safely. A doctor has signed it with a faked signature. The last letter, prepared by a special department, is a letter of condolence stating a fictitious cause of death. The signature on it is faked. At the death facility, the patients are gassed in small groups. The corpses are burnt in the facility's crematorium. In the T4 program, the Nazis' medical vision had found its vehicle of practice. That the T4 doctors falsified signatures and behaved like criminals does not mean that they doubted their own convictions. No, they worried that the German people might not be ready to understand their actions. The killings could have been done by any butcher. But if medical legitimacy was to be maintained, a doctor would have to open the gas taps. As great as the energy expended now in rooting out unworthy lives is the energy devoted to the preservation of valuable Aryan blood. German medical care was among the finest in the world, with ultra-modern methods of treatment in many areas. This double role, the physician healing with one hand and killing with the other. The other Germany had fled into silence or exile. For a good while now, the Third Reich had been killing people to make way for the new culture. By autumn of 1941, within the T4 program, over 70,000 mental patients had been gassed, but soon difficulties arose. Several of the euthanasia facilities were located near good-sized towns. The smoke from the crematoria could be plainly seen. Locks of hair wafted upward through the chimneys only to land on the streets. Drunken T4 personnel blabbered in nearby taverns. Rumors circulated about which illnesses the program dealt with. Word was that brain-damaged soldiers would share the fate of the insane. Protests from the German clergy fueled the apprehension. The fact that rumors were being spread in wartime about the liquidation of wounded soldiers was unacceptable. In August 1941, Hitler stops the more conspicuous aspects of the program. After that, the secrecy around extermination policy was tightened. Following the troops advancing eastward, special SS units, the so-called Einsatzgruppen, had the task of systematically shooting Jews, gypsies, and political commissars. This action was only meant as a stopgap. 11 million Jews could hardly be disposed of in this way. The organization which Hitler trusted to carry out extermination, the SS, were the avant-garde of Nazism. It was the cream of society. Lawyers, physicians, and other educated men that SS leader Himmler recruited to its hierarchy. An ideal example of this selection is Reinhard Heydrich, a skillful fencer, an avid violinist, and one of the pioneers of the extermination policy. On July 31, 1941, Heydrich receives written orders from Goering to carry out all measures necessary to the final solution of the Jewish question. In autumn 1941, Himmler and Heydrich name SS Captain Herbert Lange to carry out the next phase of the extermination in the East. Lange had experience of execution by gas. For the euthanasia program, he had tested a new method in East Prussia, gas vans. Using 3 of these vehicles in Kumhof, not far from Lodz, Lange will set up the first extermination camp in history. The vans serve as both gas chambers and transport trucks. The motor's exhaust is pumped into the boot. The victims are driven a short way, then dumped, and pitched directly into mass graves. The SS, too, is obliged to care for the body of the folk on 2 fronts.
Alle Tuberkulosekranken möglichst frühzeitig zu erfassen, ist der Röntgensturmbahn der SS eingesetzt. Mit eigenen Röntgenapparaten fährt in alle Gaue, Reihenuntersuchungen durchzuführen.
The SS doctors and X-ray buses tour ethnic German areas in Poland.
Alle Volksgenossen sollen vor den Röntgenschirm kommen, damit jede Infektionsquelle rechtzeitig erkannt wird.
While at the same time in Kumhof the gas vans shuttled to and fro, SS personnel with white coats and stethoscopes take in patients for treatment. The discovery of the Jewish microbe, Hitler says, is one of the greatest revolutions the world has known. The struggles of Pasteur and Koch must be carried on by us today. Countless diseases have but one microbe as their cause, the Jew. We shall be healthy when we have eliminated the Jews. This statement was made in February 1942. At about the same time, Christian Firth, who installed gas chambers for the T4 euthanasia program, is ordered to put his knowledge at the SS disposal. Wirth considered Lange with his gas vans to be an amateur. Wirth now begins building the first stationary gas chambers in the East. On March 17th, the staff at Belzec death camp received the first victims. The gas chambers are copies of the T4 facilities with greater capacity. In quick succession, the death camps of Sobibor and Treblinka are built. In the meantime, a new method was emerging, one that would eclipse the other 2 completely. At Auschwitz, tests were being made with an insecticide based on cyanide. Immediately after the German invasion of Poland, a film team commissioned by Goebbels to make a propaganda film arrived in the occupied territories. The film was shot in the squalor of the Jewish ghettos. On November 28, 1940, the film opens at one of Berlin's largest cinemas. The audience consists of representatives of the party, the army, the arts, and the sciences. Here, the campaign against the Jews reaches its zenith. This is the end of the propaganda war, the beginning of mass extermination.
Immer dort, wo sich an einem Volkskörper eine Wunde zeigt, setzen sie sich fest und ziehen aus dem zerfallenen Organismus ihre Nahrung. Mit den Krankheiten der Völker machen sie ihre Geschäfte und darum sind sie bestrebt, alle Krankheitszustände zu vertiefen und zu verewigen. So ist es in Polen, so war es in Deutschland. So haben die Juden es in ihrer ganzen Geschichte gemacht. Wo Ratten auch auftauchen, tragen sie Vernichtung ins Land, zerstören sie menschliche Güter und Nahrungsmittel. Auf diese Weise verbreiten sie Krankheiten, Pest, Lepra, Typhus, Cholera, Ruhr und so weiter. Sie sind hinterlistig, feige und grausam und treten meist in großen Scharen auf. Sie stellen unter den Tieren das Element der heimtückischen unterirdischen Zerstörung dar. Nicht anders als die Juden unter den Menschen. Am gefährlichsten aber wird das Judentum dort, wo ihm erlaubt wird, sich in die heiligsten Dinge eines Volkes, in seine Kultur, seine Religion und Kunst hineinzumischen und darüber seine anmaßenden Urteile abzugeben. Der Schönheitsbegriff des nordischen Menschen ist dem Juden von seiner ganzen Natur aus unverständlich und wird ihm ewig unverständlich bleiben. Für die Reinheit und Sauberkeit des deutschen Kunstempfindens hat der wurzellose Jude kein Organ. Was er Kunst nennt, muss seine entarteten Nerven kitzeln. Ein Geruch von Fäulnis und Krankheit muss es umwittern. Es muss wieder natürlich, grotesk, pervers oder pathologisch sein. Diese Fieberfantasien unheilbar kranker Hirne wurden einst von jüdischen Kunsttheoretikern der deutschen Öffentlichkeit als höchste künstlerische Offenbarung aufgeredet.
In 1938, another film had been made. Its theme was pest control. The film demonstrated a new, effective method using gas to kill pests.
Die Anopheles-Mücke bringt die Malaria. Die Gelbfiebermücke, auch ein Todfeind des Menschen. Aber warum in die Ferne schweifen? Unsere Fliegen sind so nah. Auch sie können Krankheiten übertragen. Typhus, Cholera, Augenentzündungen. Ein etwas unbekannterer Kollege, der Messingkäfer. Aber Kleider hat er auch zum Fressen gern. Mit Metall hat dieser Messingkäfer also nichts zu tun. Dafür macht der Holzwurm seinem Namen Ehre. Er macht nicht einmal vor wertvollen Kunstschätzen Halt. Die Chemie liefert uns zu diesem Kampf die schärfsten Waffen, die Giftgase.
In 2 more years, carbon monoxide will begin to be used on mental patients. And 3 years will pass before this gas is first used at Auschwitz. The gas is called Zyklon B.
Blausäure, die ja äußerst giftig ist, eignet sich zur Schädlingsbekämpfung ganz besonders. Hier ihre einfachste Anwendungsart. Man lässt sie von porösen Gipswürfeln aufsaugen, die dann in gewöhnlichen Blechbüchsen gasdicht verschlossen werden. Mit Blausäure durchgast man größte Betriebe ohne jede Gefahr für Mensch und Material. Die Fenster werden gasdicht verklebt.
In April 1943, Himmler gives a private speech before some SS officers.
Hier sitzt der Feind.
Anti-Semitism is like being deloused. Getting rid of lice is hardly a philosophical issue. It's a matter of cleanliness. Similarly, anti-Semitism is a hygienic measure that we have been forced to endure. We shall soon be deloused. There are only 20,000 lice left. They will soon be extinct in all of Germany.
Gas! Gas!
It was not by pure chance that an insecticide would be the Nazis' most effective weapon in the fight against the Jews. For years now, propaganda had hammered out the metaphor. The Jews as bacteria, insects, vermin. Therefore, to Auschwitz Commandant Rudolf Höss and his personnel, it cannot have been far-fetched that the stuff used to kill the camp's pests could also be used on people. For Höss, it was also a matter of delicacy.
Langsam erfüllt das Gas den ganzen Raum.
I was always appalled at the idea of shootings, he tells. Therefore, I was relieved to think that we might be spared all these bloodbaths, and that even the victims would be spared suffering until the end.
20 Stunden lang Blausäureeinwirkung und alle Schädlinge mit Brut und Larven sind vernichtet.
Hier in diesen hellen, gepflegten Räumen gibt es keine Schädlinge.
Sauberkeit und Erhaltung der wertvollen Güter bilden die Grundlagen für die Gesundheit und den Wohlstand eines Volkes.
The Nazi cult of beauty functioned as a mental cosmetic. The picture of the ideal was the screen, behind which the murderers could pursue their craft. When Auschwitz Commandant Höss describes the ideal he created for his wife and children in the death camp's shadow, it is a clear expression of this function. After mass killings began, I was no longer happy at Auschwitz, he laments. My wife could not fathom my gloomy moods. She ascribed it all to my job. After it became clear to her what I did, we seldom felt the desire for sexual intercourse. From 1942 on, the gas chamber was the foremost tool of extermination. The mass shootings had ceased. Murder took on the guise of a hygienic measure. At Auschwitz, the medical aura was kept intact. Physicians played a major role in the killing process. It was they who selected the victims and saw to it that the poison gas Zyklon B was used as prescribed. Afterward, it was they who checked to see if the victims were really dead. A system which forced the victims to operate the killing facilities would spare the killers the unpleasantness of their horrible trade. Mass murder was the ultimate consequence of Hitler's ambition to create the new man. The cosmetic of the Nazi beauty cult finally found its way into the gas chamber. The killing was a biological mission, a holy tribute to pure blood. The death factories were anthropological sanitation facilities, instruments to beautify the world. Far from Germany, in the cellars of the victors, portraits of the Nazi hierarchy come to light decades later. Alongside Gauleiter and party functionaries, we find doctors, genocide experts, and architects. Defining Nazism in traditional political terms is difficult, mainly because its dynamic was fueled by something quite different from what we usually call politics. This driving force was, to a great degree, aesthetic. Its ambition was to beautify the world through violence. From the first murders of mental patients to the mass murders of Jews, there is no real political motive. It was not enemies who were liquidated, nor opponents of the regime, but innocent people whose very existence was in conflict with the Nazi dream. The civilian character of the mass killing makes it unlike war crimes. These were civilian murders under a military guise. The obscure mental baggage, the bizarre political notions, which constitute a kind of under-vegetation in European culture, suddenly saw the light of day with Hitler. Hitler went from words to deeds. Without restraint, he transformed an absurd ideology into a hellish reality.